How does a man spend a lifetime shaking hands with champions, standing beneath Sunday sunlight, hearing crowds roar his name across fairways and grandstands, only to discover that in the quiet years it is not the trophies that return to him? First, why do certain faces remain when the applause is gone? Why do some names grow louder in memory long after the scoreboards have gone dark? And why, after everything he won, would 5 men still matter more than all the silver locked away in polished rooms? There was a time when his walk alone could change the mood of a tournament. Before he ever struck a ball, people watched differently. Opponents noticed it, reporters wrote about it, galleries leaned forward as if they already knew something was about to happen. He belonged to an age when greatness did not need branding, when pressure was not packaged for television, when reputations were built one hard Sunday at a time. Yet the strange truth about long careers is this: glory fades faster than conflict. Titles become numbers, photographs turn yellow, but certain moments never loosen their grip. A look on the practice range, a handshake that felt colder than it appeared, a silence in the locker room after everything had changed, a final round where one mistake carried the weight of years. An old caddy once said he could tell which rival mattered most by the way the room changed when that man entered. Not louder, quieter, more careful. Even legends, he said, had names they felt before they saw. Now, with the noise far behind him and nothing left to prove, he looks back across the finest era the game ever knew, not to count victories, not to polish legacy, but to speak honestly about the men who shaped his story in ways the public never fully understood. Tonight, this is not about trophies. It is about the 5 people he respected the most. He did not come from the soft age of the game. He came from a harder world, one built on long travel, heavy expectations, and the kind of scrutiny that did not always need cameras to feel merciless. In those years, a man's standing was not protected by public relations. It was tested in weather, in silence, in the final stretch of a Sunday when the course seemed to narrow, and every eye around the green carried judgment. By the time his name became part of golf's highest conversation, he was no longer simply another fine player moving through a crowded field. He had become a figure men measured themselves against. Not only because of the titles, though, there were many. Not only because of the major victories, though. Those gave his reputation its permanent weight. It was something colder than that, something more difficult to escape. He carried the look of a man who expected the moment to belong to him once pressure became real. That was what made him different in the eyes of the game. Some champions dazzled, some charmed, some overwhelmed crowds with force of personality. He did something subtler, and in many ways more unsettling. He made the contest feel serious the moment he arrived. He gave the impression that golf was not merely being played around him, but judged. Younger players felt it. Older players recognized it. The press may have searched for clean labels, but inside the sport the feeling was simpler. If he was in the field, the story was never fully yours until you had survived him. And perhaps that is why his words still carry such unusual weight now. Because when a man like this speaks late in life, he is not speaking as a spectator to history. He is speaking as one of the men who helped shape it. And when he finally names the 5 figures who stayed with him the longest, he is not offering a polite list for nostalgia's sake. He is opening the deepest part of his memory, where rivalry, admiration, injury, and truth are often too tangled to separate. Number 1, Jack Nicklaus. Some men were admired for style. Some were feared for charisma. Jack Nicklaus was something more difficult to live with. He was the standard waiting at the end of your best week. To people who only know the record books, that may sound too simple. Records can be read in an afternoon. They do not tell you what it felt like to know you had played well for 3 days, only to see him standing there on Sunday as if the tournament had been patiently saving itself for his hands. That was the private burden of his era. You were rarely beaten early. You were beaten when it mattered most. When their paths crossed in those great years, the atmosphere around it was never theatrical. There was no need for raised voices or newspaper feuds. The tension came from something quieter. Both men understood the game too deeply for cheap drama. Both knew that real damage in golf is often done politely, one controlled swing at a time. There were players with prettier motions. There were players who could electrify a crowd more quickly. But when pressure hardened and choices became narrow, Nicklaus seemed to grow clearer, while others grew crowded inside their own minds. That difference was devastating. He did not need miracles. He needed one opening, then another, then the discipline to close every door behind him. Many learned the wrong lesson from him. They thought greatness meant power, trophies, headlines, intimidation. But from inside the competition, the lesson was colder. Greatness was timing. It was the ability to hold your finest golf in reserve until the exact hour the tournament asked for it. Few men in any sport have ever understood that clock the way he did. There were afternoons when the scoreboard said the contest remained open, yet everyone walking those fairways could feel something shifting. A putt dropped, an iron settled near the flag, a mistake from someone else suddenly looked permanent, nothing dramatic on its own, everything fatal when attached to his name. That is why he belongs first on this list. Not because he won often, though he did, not because history crowned him, though it has. He belongs here because he forced every serious rival to ask the hardest question in private. If this is the level, what must I become to reach it? And for many men of that age, the honest answer was never comfortable. Number 2. Arnold Palmer. If Nicklaus made a tournament feel inevitable, Arnold Palmer could make it feel alive. There are champions who play against the course and champions who play against the field. Palmer often seemed to play against the atmosphere itself, bending it until thousands of people were breathing in rhythm with him. That was the first shock for anyone who met him in contention. You were not facing one man. You were facing the movement that followed him. The galleries changed when he arrived. They leaned closer. They reacted faster. Hope traveled with him from hole to hole. A birdie from Palmer did not sound like a birdie from someone else. It carried weight. It spread. It made ordinary moments feel larger than they were. And if you stood nearby trying to protect your own round, you could feel the ground shift beneath perfectly solid golf. That kind of pressure is difficult to explain to those who never lived inside it. The scorecard might remain fair. The numbers might say nothing had changed, yet the emotional temperature of the day belonged to him. One bold recovery shot, one charge after seeming trouble, one fearless swing when caution would have satisfied everyone else, and suddenly the tournament no longer felt neutral. What made him so dangerous was not recklessness, though he flirted with it. It was belief. Palmer trusted momentum before much of golf had language for it. He understood that confidence can move through a crowd into a leaderboard, and then quietly into the minds of the men trying to stop it. By the time many opponents recognized what was happening, they were already reacting to his energy instead of playing their own game. That was the deeper lesson he left behind. Greatness is not always cold and clinical. Sometimes it arrives warm, loud, and impossible to ignore. Sometimes it asks whether you can stay faithful to your own rhythm while the whole stage seems to belong to someone else. He belongs second on this list because he changed more than results. He changed feeling itself. He made golf larger, more human, more dramatic, and more exposed. Men who competed against him did not merely remember his shots. They remembered what it cost to remain calm, while the world around them wanted him to win. Very few players in history have carried that kind of force, and even fewer have known how to survive it. Number 3. Tiger Woods. By the time Tiger Woods arrived, the game believed it already understood greatness. It had seen control. It had seen charisma. It had seen discipline polished into legend. Then he appeared and made those old definitions feel incomplete. Some revolutions begin loudly. His began with a certainty that unsettled everyone who watched closely. From the first tee, he carried himself like a man who had already entered a private contest long before the rest of the field reached the course. There was no searching for rhythm, no visible negotiation with nerves, no slow warming into the day. He seemed to begin where others hoped to arrive. That difference changed everything. Power had existed before him. Precision had existed before him. Mental strength had existed before him. What felt new was the way all three lived inside the same player at full intensity. Opponents were not simply asked to play well. They were asked to survive a pace of pressure many had never experienced. A single mistake against him did not feel like one shot lost. It felt like a door closing. When he surged ahead, tournaments often changed shape. Players who were chasing birdies suddenly played not to fail. Men who trusted their routines started rushing decisions they would normally make in silence. Even veterans could feel themselves drifting away from their own games, pulled instead into the velocity he created. That was his hidden advantage. He did not only overpower scoreboards, he rearranged the psychology of the field. The younger generation saw something else. Fitness was no longer optional decoration around talent. Preparation became harsher, more athletic, more complete. Recovery mattered. Strength mattered. Endurance mattered. The body itself became part of championship ambition, in a way the sport could no longer ignore. Many careers after him were built inside standards he did not merely follow but impose. For those who had lived through earlier golden eras, his arrival asked an uncomfortable question. What if greatness does not stay still out of respect for tradition? What if every generation must disturb the last one in order to matter? He belongs third on this list because he did more than win. He accelerated time. He forced the old game to meet a new future before it was ready. And for many who stood close enough to witness it, the most startling part was not how dominant he became. It was how quickly the world adjusted to believing the impossible was normal. Number 4. Ben Hogan. Some legends announce themselves with noise. Ben Hogan seemed to remove noise from the room. He did not carry the theatrical pull of certain champions, nor the sweeping aura that could move galleries before a shot was struck. What surrounded him was something sterner: precision, restraint, the unsettling feeling that every careless habit another player still tolerated in himself had already been cut away in Hogan years earlier. To many spectators, greatness is easiest to recognize in moments: a miracle recovery, a closing charge, a putt under impossible pressure. Hogan represented a more demanding truth. Greatness can also be built in private through repetition so severe that chance begins to lose its authority. That is why fellow players studied him differently. They were not only watching results, they were watching method, the way he shaped preparation, the way he seemed to reduce uncertainty before the round even began. In a game where doubt can appear from any lie, any gust, any heartbeat, he treated uncertainty as an opponent to be disciplined long before Sunday arrived. There was something psychologically exhausting about men like that. Against emotional players, you could wait for frustration. Against reckless players, you could wait for errors. Against Hogan, what exactly were you waiting for? A lapse in concentration that rarely came. A technical weakness worn smooth years ago. Hope itself became difficult to organize. And yet the deeper reason he remains here goes beyond mechanics. He represented sacrifice in its hardest form, the willingness to choose a narrower life in pursuit of a cleaner game. Many admire that from distance. Far fewer understand the loneliness inside it. To chase mastery so completely is to give something up, even when the world only sees what you gained. For rivals of his generation and those who came after, he left an uncomfortable standard. Talent could no longer hide behind charm. Potential could no longer excuse disorder. If a man truly wanted greatness, how much of himself was he prepared to surrender for it? He belongs fourth on this list because he proved that domination does not always arrive through force. Sometimes it arrives through elimination. Eliminate waste. Eliminate weakness. Eliminate the part of you that asks for easier roads. And when almost everything unnecessary is gone, what remains can be terrifying. Number 5. Tom Watson. Not every rival leaves a mark through intimidation. Some stay with you because when the moment became unbearable, they remained strangely calm. Tom Watson was that kind of man. At first glance, he did not seem built to haunt an era. He was not wrapped in myth the way some champions were. He did not need the storm of a gallery or the cold machinery of fear. There was something quieter in him, almost modest, and that is exactly why many misunderstood the danger. They looked for drama and missed steel. Pressure reveals truth faster than talent ever can. Over 4 ordinary rounds, many players can appear equal. But when a championship tightens on the back nine, when every mistake grows heavier and every decision feels public before it is made, hidden differences rise to the surface. That was where Watson became most difficult to live with. He had a rare gift for making decisive moments look smaller than they were. Others felt the weight and became careful, rigid, or hurried. He seemed to step inside those same moments and simplify them. One shot, one target, one decision, nothing more. It is an extraordinary skill because the world around you is always trying to convince you the moment is larger than your swing. Those who watched the great duels of his time understood this clearly. The headlines remembered drama, but players remembered composure. They remembered a man who could stand near the edge of history and still behave as if the task in front of him were ordinary. That kind of emotional balance is rare in any sport. In golf, it can feel almost unfair. There was also something deeper in what he represented. Not dominance in the overwhelming sense, not spectacle, not reinvention. He stood for the old truth that championships are often decided by who remains most faithful to himself when chaos arrives. Many can rise on talent. Far fewer can stay whole under pressure. He belongs fifth on this list because he exposed the final test every great player must face. After the preparation, after the confidence, after the applause and reputation, can you still trust your own hands when everything is on the line? Some men answer with power, some with genius. He answered with calm, and that can be harder to defeat than either one. Looking back now, what remains is rarely what the public expects. Crowds remember victories. Record books preserve numbers. Museums protect silver and photographs. But time has a different way of judging a life in sport. It strips away noise. What survives, then, are not always the easiest days nor the cleanest triumphs. It is the men who changed your standards, the ones who forced discipline where comfort once lived, the ones who made pressure feel heavier, then taught you how to carry it, the ones who exposed flaws success had hidden, the ones who stood across from you and by doing so helped reveal who you really were. That may be the part many people miss when they talk about greatness. They search for a single answer, one name above all others, as if history were kind enough to fit inside one frame. But greatness has never worn only one face. Sometimes it arrives with command, sometimes with fire, sometimes with reinvention, sometimes with sacrifice, sometimes with calm so complete it unsettles everyone nearby. And respect is not always soft. At times, respect is born from struggle, from wounds, from long afternoons when another man asked more of you than you believed you had. Rivalry at its highest form is not hatred. It is pressure that leaves both men changed. When a champion grows older, he does not hear the applause the same way anymore. It fades into distance. What returns instead are moments, a glance before the final round, a silence after defeat, a handshake carrying more truth than words ever could, and the names attached to those moments remain long after trophies lose their shine. In the end, a legacy is not measured only by the titles you collected. It is measured by the people who still live in your memory when everything else grows quiet.